For today's video, I thought that I would show you how I create a collage background in my art journal before I start before I start painting or doing anything. I don't really like to start with a white background, so I generally either clean my brushes on here and create a background, or I do a collage, which gets me going. So I thought I'd go through some of the papers and ephemera that I use to create the collage background and create that today to give you an idea of how to do that. So a lot of times, these are the primary things I use, which is things like book paper, just torn out of old books, scrapbooking paper that I use in crafts and various card making endeavors. I also create and make and paint on deli paper, which is a very thin paper that is used to wrap up sandwiches, and that creates another fun way for collaging. The ephemera that I use typically is some fun washi tapes with different words and designs on it. This is, I don't know if you can see that, this is drywall tape, and you can cut into different different shapes, and it just has a great texture. These are things that I've just kind of gathered, a piece of burlap. Any kind of tissue paper will work. These are vintage patterns that you can pick up at the thrift store, because once someone makes a pattern, they typically do not make it again. You can use old stamps. This doily's part of a doily that I got in a pack from the dollar store. Old tickets. This is wallpaper. You can get at the thrift store, just old rolls. Napkins. It doesn't have to be decorative. It can just be a white one or whatever you have on hand. And old receipts from a receipt, cut type book or ledger book or anything like that would work as well. Now, if you don't have any of those things and you really don't want to spend any money to go get anything, and I would advise that you don't when you start, just use what you have. I'm guessing you probably have something like masking tape or a variety of different tapes that you can use. That helps put texture down. Paper towels have a really cool texture, and you could use paper toweling. You could use wrapping paper. This is just a piece of wrapping paper. You could use the inside, the cardboard. If you kind of tear it apart, cardboard creates this. And if you do not have a box to tear apart right now, save your next Amazon order, and you'll have a box to work with. You could use an old calendar or an old date book type thing if you use it old school. One thing I know you have is junk paper from the mail, so that could be torn up and used. And lastly, for an idea, magazines or catalogs, papers. So the ideas are endless. You can come up with your own, walk around your house, see what you have, use what you have, as would be my idea when you get started. For a place to work, if you do not have an art journal, you don't need one. You could use a sheet of paper, preferably something a little sturdier, like a cardstock, or you could use actual cardboard from that Amazon package that you got delivered. You could just cut it or tear it and work on that. You could work on a canvas. You could work on just about anything. So just a fun way to get started, and I think sometimes we get hindered by having to buy all the supplies when we really don't. We just need to dig right in and get started. So I already have my glue ready to go, but I wanted to show you what I'm using is Mod Podge today. I also tend to use a matte medium. This is a Liquitex one, but either of those work great, and you can use artist quality or just craft quality. It doesn't really matter for this project today. And I'm just using a little bit older brush, because my this glue does tend to make for a sticky brush. So even when you put it in water. So I'm just laying down some of the Mod Podge to get the paper ready to put on some of the things we have here. And I think I'm going to try to use a lot of the different supplies that we have just to kind of give you an idea. I do like to have a rough edge when I'm working. I feel like the paper lays down better. I feel like it adds a little bit more interest and a little bit more texture. So when I can, I tend to tend to tear a little bit. So I apologize if it's making a noisy sound on the video. Let's put this one down here. And if it seems odd that you would just use a bunch of junk, and you know, obviously these are 2 white pieces that I put down here first. I'm really gonna like this rough edge here. It's because the papers, for the most part, aren't going to be seen. So it doesn't really matter what's underneath unless you're doing some kind of, unless you're going to be showing those papers. And sometimes I do. Sometimes, you know, I'll use them in a collage, you know, after. I mean, I'll start a background and then I'll put some more collage down just to have it showing. But for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm just going to act as though we are just going to paint over them. So the paper that is thinner, I will say, tends to go on easier. The thicker your paper, the harder it is to get it to go on. So you need a nice coat underneath and then a nice coat on top. This paper up here, I don't know if you can see, it's getting some folds and creases, and I like that because it adds to the texture. You don't want a lot of bubbles underneath because that definitely will create some problems down the road, but a little bit of creasing is good. It's fine, at least for me. If you want it really smooth, then I would suggest you take your catalyst wedge, if you have something like this, or a key card or an old card, and swipe it and really smooth it out, because that's a great way to do that. But I don't mind a little bit of bubbling, or not bubbling, but you know, folding over. Kind of increases the texture. Okay, our page is covered, or your canvas, or your paper, or your cardboard. And from here, you got to let it dry an hour or so. You can use a heat gun to it if you want to speed up the process. And then after that, next time I'm going to show you what we're going to do with it and how we're going to turn this mess of different papers and textures and colors into something really cool. All right, I'll see you next time.